Let's talk about some of the scientific advice which the government should be listening to. I have a funny feeling if they've been listening to people like my next guest, we might be in a different position today. Professor Tim Spector is a lead scientist on the ZOE Covid Symptom Study app. It's been one of the most accurate apps in terms of a million people telling them their symptoms every day and really tracking just how this virus is spreading. He's also Professor of Genetic Epidemiology at King's College London and joins us now. Good morning to you, Tim.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Julia.
Now, I know you don't get involved in the politics of all of this, and quite rightly, as a scientist. However, you have been producing evidence throughout this pandemic showing the likely prevalence of infections and looking at the data on hospitalizations and, of course, deaths, which follow on with a really pretty regular time lag between all those things. The evidence that we were given for going into a lockdown was pretty clearly debunked within hours by people like Professor Carl Hennigan of Oxford University about this 4,000 a day thing. But we've been told the lockdown did work and that tiers work and that tiers we need to go back to more tier restrictions. Does the evidence that you're seeing as a genuine expert in this field, does that suggest that these restrictions are needed?
I think it's complicated and everything is all about timing because everything the government has said might have been true at a different time point. And it's just the problem is that by the time they get information, they have a decision and then they have this long process of discussion and then a lot of the politics that follows. The decisions they made often several weeks ago are no longer applicable in this very fast moving area. So that seems to be the major problem here, is that they're not able to use the latest data to inform the latest sort of major countrywide and political decisions.
So even with the tier restrictions, a lot of the decision was made last week, but it was using data that was already a week out of date, we understand.
Exactly. So they're not using the most up-to-date data. They're using older data and older models in their projections that are in a rather narrow range of these estimates. So they're not taking all the estimates from different groups. That have a very focused idea, and by the time they get to apply these models, the situation has moved on. And then what they're now doing is, in a way, retrospectively justifying their decisions with some other statistics. So, I think most people are in general agreement that the tier system was working and that they didn't hold their nerve enough and weren't using the latest data, which had always showed that before we went into lockdown, a lot of these measures had started to bite in the north and Liverpool and places like this, where the curve had already turned and was on the way down. And this was, they'd reached the peak and were going down. And so the extra measures, haven't been proven to have made a bigger difference than, say, those tier 3 ones in those badly affected areas. Because what we're seeing is there's a 2-week lag roughly from when we see new cases starting to fall and when admissions fall. And that's been proven to be true. So we're now, we saw over a month ago in the north, where everything happened in Scotland, the north, things started changing, and then that trend has moved south. 2 weeks later, we see admissions around the country falling, and that's what we're seeing pretty much everywhere now. And so the idea that the NHS is currently overrun really isn't borne out by the current data. If you look at the very latest data, we're seeing 80 to 85% capacity across most trusts, with an exception of a handful. And I do accept there are areas where the NHS is under strain, as it is in most years, and we do need to take that into consideration.
And a lot of this, isn't it? It's about a proportionate response, something I've been arguing for some months, but also it's about seeing things in context. So people are saying, well, we've got these excess deaths. There are people dying. This isn't a hoax. This is a real virus. It kills people, and we don't want anybody to die of this virus who can be saved. But in order to save people from dying of this virus, some of the measures that are required may end up, as we know, costing more lives, costing more livelihoods, the economic costs, et cetera, et cetera. So it's about a proportionate response. But we also in a situation where we do have some excess deaths this year, right now. However, it is not; these are not unusual excess deaths. When we do a comparison, say with a 5-year average, we have an older population now. We know the baby boomers coming to the age where sadly they will be reaching the end of their lives. We're likely to see an increase in death rates anyway because of that large big population bulk. But we saw it in year 2000. Was it 48,000 excess deaths from flu? The year 2018, we had excess deaths. We have years where we have more people who die of various viruses every year. Are the deaths that you're seeing right now, are they out of the ordinary?
Well, it depends how you describe ordinary. They're certainly bigger than average, and there's no doubt there are excess deaths. Current estimates put it, there are different estimates, but it looks like at the moment it's around, this time of year, around 10% above the 5-year average. But of course it would have been more if we'd done as in a normal year and done nothing. So I think the measures we've brought in have reduced that. So it's always trying to work out what the natural one is and where we are at the moment, because most of the models assume we're going to just do nothing and be like lemmings and jump off the cliff.
Which is stupid, because we wouldn't do that. Even with just voluntary measures, we wouldn't do that.
Correct. When we start seeing neighbours and friends, ill and going to hospital, then people change naturally their behaviour. And this is why these voluntary restrictions, these sort of tier 1s and tier 2s, do actually work pretty effectively. And it's sort of unclear whether some of these more extreme ones have a greater effect if rates are going up anyway, because people do naturally behave well when they see they are really in a crisis situation. And I think that's perhaps where I would like to see more trust given to people to behave that way. And to do that, we need to give people more information. At the moment, we're not seeing local hospitals overrun in the vast majority of areas, despite what some politicians have said, where claiming the whole country was about to break down. We didn't recognize that in the data, and we still don't. Positions is slowly getting better every day, which is great, and that does need people to behave responsibly. But I think what people need is local information that will allow them to themselves see which tier they should be going into. So I've got no problem with the tier system itself. I just think we need to change the criteria for going in and out of them. I agree there's no point in someone 100 miles away from a hospital that might be nearing capacity in closing their pub. That doesn't make any sense. So we need perhaps more local information, and people can make their own mind up about which way the virus is going, where the hospitalization are. Is there a certain limit, something like a percentage of ITU beds that are full that triggers, a much more major lockdown? And people would understand that. And I think giving people that information on a dashboard is what's really needed here, because these out-of-date plans really aren't working.
Okay. Professor Tim Spector, really appreciate you joining us. As I said, really, really happy for politicians to listen to the experts, but let's listen to the experts relying on the data. Professor Tim Spector, he's the lead scientist on the ZOE COVID app. He's also Professor of Genetic Epidemiology at King's College London. Appreciate your time.